Within the last hour, the authorities in Los Angeles have been giving more details about their investigation into the deaths of the actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy.
Within hours of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, being found dead inside their secluded Santa Fe home, what initially looked like a tragic discovery became one of the most closely watched death investigations in Hollywood. On the morning of February 26, 2025, maintenance and security personnel became concerned after they were unable to reach the couple. Authorities were called to the property, and inside they found the 95-year-old actor and his 65-year-old wife dead in separate areas of the house, along with one of their dogs. At first, there was no obvious explanation for why two people living together had died under such unusual circumstances. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, no apparent trauma, and no immediate evidence pointing clearly to a crime. Yet the scene was unusual enough that investigators considered the deaths suspicious and obtained a warrant to conduct a thorough search. Gene Hackman had spent decades portraying characters surrounded by danger, secrecy, surveillance, and hidden information. But by the time of his death, he had been retired from acting for more than 20 years and was living a quiet, private life in New Mexico. Away from Hollywood, Hackman had also developed another passion: writing. He co-authored historical fiction and spent years researching subjects that interested him. That background would later make the digital evidence recovered from the house particularly intriguing to investigators and the public. When deputies first entered the property, they encountered a scene that was disturbing but not immediately explainable. Betsy Arakawa was found in a bathroom, while Hackman was found in another part of the house. One of their dogs was dead nearby, while two others survived. Investigators initially considered several possibilities, including carbon monoxide poisoning, because the couple had been found in separate areas and had apparently been dead for some time. But subsequent testing found no gas leak, and authorities eventually ruled out carbon monoxide as the cause. The investigation became even more complicated because the couple had apparently been living increasingly isolated lives. Their home was private, their contact with the outside world was limited, and there was a significant gap between the final known activities of the couple and the moment their bodies were discovered. Investigators therefore began reconstructing their final days through everything available: phone records, emails, security footage, medical information, internet searches, and electronic devices. And this is where the computer evidence became important. Contrary to some sensational stories circulating online, authorities have not publicly confirmed that the FBI discovered a secret collection of disturbing files on a laptop belonging to Gene Hackman, nor have officials confirmed the existence of a hidden tunnel, underground archive, or secret government vault beneath his home. Those details should not be presented as established facts. What investigators actually documented is far more grounded in the evidence, and in some ways even more revealing. Authorities later returned to the property and searched specifically for Betsy Arakawa's laptop and other clues. Investigative records released later showed that her computer contained information about her final days, including searches related to illness and flu-like symptoms. Between February 8th and the morning of February 12th, Arakawa had repeatedly searched online for information about symptoms associated with COVID-19 and influenza. Some of those searches involved dizziness, nosebleeds, breathing problems, and other symptoms. She was not simply browsing randomly. The records showed that she was actively trying to understand what was happening to her and possibly to her husband. The evidence became particularly significant when investigators reconstructed what happened on February 11th. Arakawa had told her massage therapist that Hackman had awakened feeling as though he had the flu or a cold. She said a COVID test had been negative and that she wanted to postpone her appointment as a precaution. The following day, she searched for a concierge medical service in Santa Fe and contacted the service. The call lasted less than 2 minutes, and investigators later found that she missed a return call. Those details changed the picture. Instead of an unexplained mystery involving an outside intruder, the electronic evidence began to show a household dealing with illness in its final days. On February 12th, Arakawa's searches became increasingly focused on health concerns. Investigators found evidence that she was trying to understand symptoms and possible causes, but she did not receive the medical assistance she appeared to be seeking. After that point, communication from the household effectively stopped. Investigators also examined security footage, pharmacy records, phone activity, voicemails, and other information to determine when Arakawa was last active. The records eventually helped authorities establish a much clearer timeline. Arakawa died first. Her official cause of death was hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a rare but potentially fatal disease associated with exposure to infected rodents. Environmental investigators later found evidence of rodent activity around parts of the property. Gene Hackman died approximately a week later. His cause of death was heart disease, with Alzheimer's disease listed as a contributing factor. Investigators concluded that his Alzheimer's was advanced enough that he may not have understood that his wife had died or recognized what had happened around him. His pacemaker data indicated that his heart stopped functioning around February 18th, several days before the couple were discovered. That timeline is one of the most heartbreaking elements of the entire case. Imagine the final days inside that house. Betsy becomes increasingly ill. She searches for answers online. She attempts to contact medical help. Then she dies. Gene, already suffering from advanced Alzheimer's and serious heart disease, remains inside the home. According to investigators, he may have been unaware that his wife was no longer alive. Days pass. No one comes inside. No one realizes what has happened. Eventually, people outside the home become concerned, and authorities are called. The later release of police body camera footage provided the public with an extraordinary glimpse into the investigation. Deputies moved through the property trying to understand what had happened. They examined rooms, checked possible hazards, documented medications, looked at the surroundings, and attempted to establish a timeline. The house itself did not immediately look like the scene of a violent crime. Investigators found no obvious signs of forced entry and no clear evidence that someone had ransacked the property. Yet investigators did not simply walk away. They continued examining the digital trail. They returned to the home. They searched for Arakawa's laptop. They reviewed her internet history. They examined phone calls and emails. They looked at pharmacy and store security footage. They spoke with people who had interacted with the couple. They examined the environment surrounding the property. And slowly, the mystery became less about a hidden criminal conspiracy and more about reconstructing a tragedy that had unfolded largely out of public view. That distinction matters because the internet quickly produced much more dramatic versions of the story. Claims appeared suggesting that investigators had discovered secret files, hidden government documents, underground tunnels, classified archives, and other extraordinary discoveries inside Hackman's estate. But there is a major difference between a compelling theory and documented evidence. As of the publicly released investigative records, authorities have not confirmed those dramatic claims. What they have confirmed is already remarkable enough. A legendary Hollywood actor spent his final years living quietly in Santa Fe. His wife became seriously ill without receiving the medical treatment she appeared to be seeking. She died first. Hackman survived for days afterward, apparently unaware of the full situation because of his advanced Alzheimer's disease. Eventually, their deaths were discovered, prompting an investigation that initially treated the circumstances as suspicious. And the computers became an important part of understanding what happened. The digital evidence did not reveal a secret criminal empire or a hidden government conspiracy. Instead, it helped investigators reconstruct the final days of Betsy Arakawa's life. Her searches showed concern about illness. Her communications showed concern about Gene. Her attempt to contact a medical service showed that she was looking for help. And then the digital trail stopped. That silence became one of the most important clues. Gene Hackman's own story adds another layer to the tragedy. He had spent a lifetime playing characters who were suspicious, determined, morally complicated, and often trapped inside dangerous situations. In films such as The French Connection, The Conversation, Enemy of the State, and Crimson Tide, He repeatedly portrayed men dealing with pressure, secrecy, surveillance, and information that could change everything. But there was no movie ending to his real story. There was no dramatic confrontation, no mysterious stranger entering through the gates, no confirmed secret passage beneath the house. Instead, the final chapter appears to have been painfully ordinary. Illness, isolation, declining health, and two people whose final days unfolded largely without anyone else knowing. That may be why the case captured so much attention. People wanted the ending to be something extraordinary because Gene Hackman's life had been extraordinary. He was one of Hollywood's most respected actors. He won 2 Academy Awards and appeared in more than 80 films across a career spanning decades. Even after leaving Hollywood, he continued writing and living privately in New Mexico. His final years were far removed from the celebrity world he had once dominated. And yet, when he died, the world came looking for a mystery. The mystery was there, but not necessarily the one people expected. The real mystery was how two people could disappear from the outside world for so long without anyone realizing the seriousness of their situation. The investigation ultimately provided an explanation for their deaths, but the circumstances surrounding their final days remained deeply unsettling. Betsy Arakawa had been searching for answers about illness. She had tried to reach medical help. Gene Hackman was already dealing with serious cognitive decline. And after Betsy died, Hackman appears to have continued living inside the home for days without understanding what had happened. The couple's dogs were also part of the tragedy. One died inside the property, while the other 2 survived and were eventually cared for. Environmental investigators later documented rodent activity around portions of the property, providing a possible connection to the hantavirus diagnosis. Eventually, authorities concluded that the deaths were natural. But the investigation itself tells another story. A story about how difficult it can be to reconstruct the final days of people who live privately, especially when technology becomes the only remaining record of their activities. The laptop did not necessarily contain the explosive secret that online rumors claimed. Instead, it contained something investigators could actually use: traces of a person's final attempts to understand what was happening. Searches, emails, calls, records, digital footprints, pieces of a life that disappeared almost completely when the people who created them were gone. And perhaps that is the most disturbing part of the entire Gene Hackman case. Not what investigators supposedly found behind a hidden door. Not an alleged secret archive. Not an unconfirmed FBI conspiracy. But the realization that someone can be surrounded by information and technology and still become completely isolated. Gene Hackman spent decades entertaining millions of people around the world. His face was recognized everywhere. His voice was familiar to generations of moviegoers. Yet in the final days of his life, he and Betsy Arakawa were largely alone. Their story ended quietly inside the home they had chosen for privacy. The investigation began with questions. Why were they found in separate rooms? Why had no one heard from them? How long had they been dead? What happened to Betsy? What happened to Gene? And what could their phones, computers, emails, searches, and other records reveal? Investigators eventually answered the central question. Betsy Arakawa died from hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Gene Hackman died about a week later from heart disease, with Alzheimer's disease contributing to his condition. But the records also revealed something more human. They showed a woman trying to understand an illness. They showed a husband whose health had already been deteriorating. They showed a household gradually becoming disconnected from the outside world. And they showed how digital evidence can preserve the final traces of people even after they are gone. That is the real story behind the laptop. Not a confirmed secret FBI file. Not a proven underground conspiracy. But a digital record of the final days of two people whose lives had become almost completely private. And in the end, the most unsettling discovery was not something hidden beneath the mansion. It was how quietly the tragedy had unfolded inside it.